Hey guys, Will here. So today's video is a really exciting one. There's a brand new player entering the sim racing space, and these guys have some genuine large scale production capacity behind them. We're talking Fanatec levels of production capacity. So brand new brand, and they're going to be doing some very exciting things, at least I hope, in the sim racing space. So the brand is called Asetek SimSports, and reading from their little blurb on their Facebook page right now, it says Asetek SimSports will be the best in class in sim racing. We'll offer a plug and play system and put you in the driver's seat for the best sim sports experience in the world. So that is a pretty big claim. We're lucky enough today to have founder and CEO André Eriksen from Asetek right here with us. We're going to be chatting with him today about exactly what Asetek SimSports are going to be doing. Now, just to give you a bit of an idea behind the scenes here, Asetek is a brand that's been around for quite some time now. A lot of you guys have probably actually used their products in the past in PC builds without even realizing it. A lot of PC enthusiasts within the sim racing space may be familiar with the old Vaporchill systems of the early 2000s. Some pretty crazy innovative stuff that took place there. And I'm a little bit starstruck to be talking to André today because I've personally followed the brand right since the Vaporchill days. So let's just dive straight into it. We've got André on the line. This is going to be a good one. So let's get going. All right, well, thank you very much for joining us today, André. It's pretty surreal for me to be talking to you at all, to be honest with you, because I've followed your company from the very, very early days of Vaporchill. I was into overclocking and all that stuff back in my teens. So, as I said, the story is a pretty remarkable one. So just give us a little bit of background about Asetek and how you started out, what you did in the past, and yeah, where we're heading into the future.
Yeah. So, well, I guess the pleasure is mine. It's fun for me as well as the founder of Asetek to spend time with someone who actually knew us from back then. That's remarkable, and it's fun, of course. Yeah, so I'm the founder of the company. I have a background as a tool maker originally. So I was doing stamping tools, molding tools, meaning that I knew how to use my hands and machinery and all that stuff. And then I took an engineering degree, and while I was studying at the university, I got into the whole overclocking scheme as well. And it was actually fun, both fun and funny, because at the university that I went on, we had group work. So you would actually live at the university together with your group mates for extended periods of time, and night and day, basically. And our group room looked like a data center. We had so many cables and so many computers everywhere. And the people that I studied with, they were playing all the time, gaming. And I'm actually not that much of a gamer. But I found out that there was this specific motocross game, I forgot what it was called. But if you overclock the PC, the faster CPU you would have, the better you would be in the game, and the better frame rates, etc. So I could beat all of them. And that's where I actually got the interest from overclocking. And then I started to build in, as you know, in the Vapochill, a refrigeration compressor. And then, to make it short, after that I went to Danfoss, one of Denmark's largest corporations, in their management trainee program. So I was actually supposed to go the management route. But Danfoss at the time was also the world's largest manufacturer of hermetic compressors. So at Danfoss, I actually got to explore and work with Vapochill and overclocking and all that stuff. Then I broke out of that a few months after, and then I founded Asetek, and then since then off it went.
Just went off, yeah. So I think, thinking back to those times, because I was overclocking as well back in the early 2000s, and back then you didn't have the hardware that you have now that was designed specifically for overclocking. So we were soldering resistors and all bits and pieces onto motherboards. We were drawing little lines with bits of pencil to unlock CPUs and all those little. It was a real sort of enthusiast game. And I remember from my side of the table, Vaporchill came out, and it was like, whoa, this is incredible, because it suddenly unlocked all this power. And I think for me, part of the appeal of that product was the fact that for mainstream people, you always had the option of just going out and buying a faster computer, right? But what you were doing was so unique in the fact that you were producing a product that was enabling people to make their computer go even faster than what you could just buy off the shelf. So your option was for people where just buying a faster computer wasn't even an option at all. So even though it was such a niche product, it was such an exciting product in that regard as well. So I know for me, And a lot of the guys that I worked with at the time, it was like, oh, wow. And we actually had a Vaporchill in the office where I worked. A couple of guys used to play around with it, and I didn't get a whole lot of hands-on time with it, but yeah, some of the guys were setting records with it and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. So I guess, as we were sort of saying before, it was a bit of a niche product. So how did you sort of turn it into the, a business the size that it is now?
That's an excellent question, because what was so cool, literally, with the Vaporchill was that I referred to it before as the Ferrari effect. If you imagine how many people know the brand of Ferrari compared to how many cars they sell, for example, it was the same here. I think that Vaporchill product took headlines around the globe on all computer magazines you could think of. We had a free front page because everybody wanted to review and talk about the product. But it obviously had its downsides in terms of cost and complexity. So from there on, we went into what we called Waterchill, which was liquid cooling. And for those who remember, we tried to make liquid cooling easy. So although you had to fill it yourself and buy discrete components, we made it easy with quick connects, and we made this kit-based thing where at the time you couldn't really buy a kit. You had to buy a water block for the CPU or the GPU, and you had to buy some fittings. And we made this kit-based approach. And probably, I don't know how many of your current audience know, but there was a huge trade show called CeBIT. It may or may not still exist, but it was gigantic at the time. So we launched it there, and I remember the first weekend we sold like 10,000 kits, which was crazy. Wow. We went from Vaporchill selling a few hundred on a really good month to going to one trade show and having orders for 10,000 kits. And we had this Antarctica liquid cooling block that was pretty well known at the time. But the problem with that product range was we made everything in Denmark by hand and machine, and it was really a nice crafted product. But the problem was, there were two problems. One of them was that it was still too exotic for most. And number two, we would have typically Taiwanese and Chinese companies copy us all the time. So every time we put something on the market, we would get copied 2 months later. And because of the low labor rate out there, they would just compete on cost all the time. And that was really the Kickstarter to where I was like, okay, how do we deal with this?
Right.
And that's where I got the idea of making what's called or what's known as the all-in-one liquid cooler today. My vision and my passion was to roll out liquid cooling to as many as possible, but I wanted to make it low cost. And when I say low cost, I wanted it to be low cost enough that the OEMs like Dell, for example, could actually build it into a PC and sell it. And Dell Alienware is actually our biggest gaming customer today on the OEM side. And
that's interesting. One of the things I was going to say was a lot of people have probably used your products but don't even realize that they've used them because you have so many OEM partnerships as well. And you moved to Silicon Valley at one point to actually focus on that side of the business, didn't you?
Right. I don't know if we talked about it, but I'm in Denmark. I'm also in Denmark right now as we speak. Keep in mind, back then I was a young entrepreneur with a really small company, and trying to get in contact with these giants was pretty tough. So I thought I had to move to the US. So yes, I moved to San Jose, Silicon Valley in 2007 and was there for I think 8 years or something like that. And that was really a big change to our success, let's put it like that.
And I suppose in the background at the same time you were having to sort of, I guess, refocus the business around, larger scale production rather than sort of being more hands-on as well. So you were working with other partners as well to handle production too, or were you still doing a lot of that stuff in your own factories?
I think actually we have the same setup today. It's a kind of a hybrid. We have, of course, a contract manufacturer, probably right now 500-600 people on the line. But we still design a lot of the jigs, a lot of the mounting tools, the test machinery, etc. If you want to build a cell phone, for example, the ODMs and the OEMs, they know how to do that. But we have sold 10 million liquid coolers now. How do you...
Wow, 10 million?
Yes, and you couldn't go and buy a filling machine for how do you fill 200 liquid coolers an hour. So all these machines and all that part of it, we actually developed in the background. So we kept the company alive in Denmark, where we had engineering and a lot of that stuff as well. And then, all manufacturing in China at the time.
Wow, that's quite amazing how, it's rare that you come across people that have, that genuine passion for something like you do, but also the business brain to actually put something together and actually be able to see it from a standpoint of being able to be scalable and everything as well. So I guess the next question I had on my list was, what do you attribute the success of Asetek to? You mentioned before the Ferrari effect, but I suppose it's a combination of a lot of different things, isn't it?
Yeah, I think passion is a good place to start. When we hire people in Asetek back then and still, we want people with fire in their eyes.
Absolutely.
That's the whole point. And many of my employees have been here for 15 years, 10 years, 12 years, probably 18 years. So I think the passion for what we do is really one of the key successes. The other success is, of course, and undeniable, the product. And when I say the product, it's not just the performance. It's, we really nailed it. At the time, I think some of the gaming OEMs that we all know today, if they were even selling liquid cooling at the time, they would sell 200-300 a month. It was really a niche game. Whereas when we launched with our first OEMs, we were selling 10,000-15,000 per month immediately. So we really hit it with this all-in-one liquid cooler that we made it easy. And I don't know any companies or any CEOs who would sit in an interview like this and say we have shitty quality. Nobody will say that. So it could be heard as marketing stunt, but we really focus a lot on quality. And I think that has been a key differentiator. I looked at our quality statistics the other day, and we are not quite automotive grade yet, but we are pretty close. And I think that's really a key thing. I can say that our number one quality problem, when our OEMs return products to us, it's actually no faults found. It's typically a user error. So, I think the right team, the right amount of risk willingness, the right amount of drive, that's a little bit the same as passion, but you can be passionate and still giving up, where we are like, giving up is not really an option. And, I think it's still in public record, we were probably a non-profitable company for, 7-9 years.
Wow, so that long.
Yeah.
But during that period, you created a desirable brand, which you were then able to transfer across to mass production. I think that's probably, for me, looking from the outside in, that's probably really where the key to the success story lies.
Yeah, I can honestly tell you that I moved to the US with my wife and 2 small kids, and another mission than finding customers was to find venture capital in Silicon Valley. And if I did not succeed, there was money enough for my salary for 6 months, and then there would not be enough money for a flight ticket home. That was the odds.
Wow.
But I believed in it.
And you had a family to think about as well, on top of all that.
For sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in a sort of similar situation on a much smaller scale here as well, because I've had to take risks as well to sort of, go out on my own and start boosted media as well. So, you had to really sort of be able to think big picture, and you had to really, truly believe in what you were doing.
Yes.
So I guess that brings us pretty much up to date with the history of the brand. So obviously you're sitting in front of a beautiful car right now. Where does the motorsport and I guess more importantly for our audience, where does the simulation stuff fit into the story?
Yeah, I think to understand that, we actually have to talk motorsports for a second, because when I was a kid, I did motocross. I don't really come from a wealthy family, so I had to get away with what I could. And then I didn't touch motorsports for many years, other than I followed Formula 1 and car racing and all kind of racing. But then when I moved to the US, a good friend of mine, André Eriksen was his name, or is his name. He was actually the chief sales and marketing officer at AMD at the time.
Wow.
But I convinced him to join Asetek's board of directors. And he then introduced me up at Sonoma Raceway to go-kart racing. And then I'm the kind of guy, if I do something, I do it 110%. So I wanted to be the
I
best.
get that impression.
And I wanted to be the best. I wanted to win championships, which I did, and I moved into Formula cars and all that stuff. Both my kids were racing at the time. My son is now racing GT3, and so we've been involved in racing for many years. And as a part of my racing, my own racing, I'm not sure if it was 2007 or 2009 or whatever, but I actually built my first simulator in Silicon Valley myself. It was a motion platform and Logitech wheels and stuff, not super high end, but I built the simulator there, and then later on I built a simulator for my son. That was not really for gaming. That was for real track practice and how to get better at the track. And a fun little fact was that it was built on Daniil Kvyat, so the former Red Bull Formula 1 driver. It was built on his Formula Renault chassis. So it was a pretty nice setup. We are probably 3-4 years back now. So I have known simulators from, let's say, from the professional side, not so much gaming or for the fun of it, more like how do you use it as a driver's tool. And I never really had an idea of Asetek moving into that area until a couple of years back. We built something we call the Asetek Esports Academy. We have 15 high-end Alienware gaming PCs with our liquid cooling, of course. And then as a part of our social responsibility program here in the neighborhood, we let young people come in and play for free. If they want to do esports on a serious level, we will actually help them with coaching and things like that. So it's obviously a typical Counter-Strike and things like that. But in the corner, we placed 5 driving simulators. And that was also a part of this. So not for business purposes for Asetek, it was purely a CSR program. But what we found was, and that's actually back to the early liquid cooling days, and there you will see the similarities in a second. What we found was to build simulators today, or at least a couple of years back, you would have to buy from many different companies. There were no standards. It was almost impossible to have these 5 simulators run at the same time. Then there was driver issues. Then you would have buttons falling off the steering wheel. Then the pedal will not work. Then somebody would almost cut their fingers by moving the seat back and forth in the rig. And the rig will fall apart. It was really complicated. And then I got the idea and said, okay, what is a simulator? Well, it's what's called mechatronics. It's mechanical products, it's hardware, and it's software. And this whole concept that you need to install a patch to make the firmware work, or you upgrade this and that, it gets really complicated, and you really have to be a PC expert to drive a simulator. So I started to wonder if we can do this better at Asetek. And that's actually how it started. And the whole plan is basically like we did on the liquid cooling market, that we want to sell an integrated product. We will probably get back to it, what that means, but we want to sell an integrated product at a quality level that can actually, withstand some beating, and with preferably one piece of software to control everything. And then we want it to be reliable. We don't want things falling off, and of course nobody's perfect, but we really want to. As an example, on our brake pedal, I'm sure we'll get back to that, but a real race car driver is easily pressing with 160 bars of pressure. Not easily, you have to be pretty good to do that, but nevertheless, and our product should be able to withstand that. We don't want our product to fall apart as soon as you have a real race car driver in it. Of course, we realize not everyone is race car drivers, so we also wanted to cater to, let's say, a little bit more normal sim racers. But that was really, and that is the philosophy. And then finally, we want to do it at price points where perhaps not everybody can afford it, but at least a much bigger portion than today. That's the idea.
Yeah. So you want it to be as accessible as possible. I think you highlighted a couple of really important factors there, which I think a lot of people don't realize is, first and foremost, probably, integration of hardware into motorsport is very, very complex, and it's noisy, it's rough, it's purely function over form. And a lot of times I kind of look back at some of the old spacecraft that used to take people to the moon and stuff, and you look inside those spacecraft and it's literally just nothing is there unless it actually needs to be there for a functional purpose. And I think people a lot of the time don't realize that race cars are very similar to that as well. You've got parts that are taken from all sorts of different places, and you've got in a proper motorsports team, you've got engineers that are responsible for certain parts of the car, even not just one person for the entire car. You've got subject matter experts for those individual components. So, that's uniformity and being able to bring everything together into an ecosystem that just kind of works. That definitely reduces the barrier to entry down for a lot of people, I think, which is fantastic. And I think the other thing that you mentioned there as well is the refinement in terms of quality too. So, a lot of times it's quite funny. We get a lot of messages from people, saying they bought this piece of sim racing hardware and it's too noisy or it rattles around too much. And I kind of think, well, have you ever actually sat in a real race car? So understanding that, I guess that hybrid, I think that was the word you used, hybrid, sweet spot between simulating what it's like to actually sit in a real racecraft, in a real race car, but also understanding what people actually want on a home simulator. So they want it to be quiet, they want it to be smooth, they want it to be consistent and dependable, but they also want to create that real life experience as well. So understanding that desire exists in the first place, I think that's, it's great to see that you actually you've got your head around that. That's really exciting. So in terms of the sim racing stuff, obviously I mentioned before, I've been following your brand for a good 15, almost 20 years now, but you popped up on my sim racing radar when I noticed that you guys purchased Ultimate Game Tech, who obviously make a lot of the displays that we see in a few different popular sim racing wheels. So I was kind of aware and keeping an eye on you guys for a while there. Then I noticed as well, you popped up again on the radar. I saw a press release from you guys when you acquired some IP from Granite Devices, which are obviously the parent company to Simucube. So I can see in front of you right now this exciting looking set of pedals, but obviously there's a bigger story there as well. So why don't we start to sort of talk a little bit more about the sim racing gear? Take us through the pedals that you have in front of us, and then we can sort of elaborate a little bit more into, I guess, your greater plan in terms of this ecosystem that we've been talking about.
I'll start with the pedals, and then I'll cover the acquisitions and the bigger plans afterwards. Mm-hmm. But the reason why we started with the pedals, number one, we believe that was the, let's say, easiest and shortest path to market. Number two, as you probably know, driving a race car, you actually steer the car as much with your feet as you do with your hands. So
that's right.
We believe there was and still is a gap in that department. So that's why we started with the pedals, and I do realize you are the reviewer, so you'll get to play around with it. But what I have here
Excellent.
Is really as close as to a production set as you will get, and I think this is actually the one I'm holding here in my hand is the one that you will get to have a closer look
awesome.
At. But what you will see is that it's an all metal and aluminum construction. It's mm-hmm. heavy duty, and you can also see the throttle. It's absolutely not fancy. It's a throttle. Yeah. It has a spring.
Because it doesn't need to be. Yeah.
No. You can adjust the spring. You have a wireless sensor here. You don't really need any hydraulics or anything like that for the throttle. You can adjust mm-hmm. the angle, of course. And one thing you will see is our pedals are in a 90 degrees angle, because that's how you have it in a race car, and that's how you get the best brake efficiency and so forth. Mm-hmm. Same with the clutch here. It's not really something super fancy, but it does have a physical bite point that you can configure in the hardware. As you can perhaps see also that there is this line here, so you can actually buy it without the clutch pedal, and then you can just attach the clutch pedal. Obvious reasons. Formula cars typically don't have clutch. The car behind me, the GT3, doesn't have a clutch. So that's really up to the end user. And then I think for me, perhaps the most exciting is this dual piston brake cylinder we have here that we invented, where you have a real and true hydraulic feeling. This feels like a real race car. I do realize a lot of sim racers, they want a long travel and a soft pedal. Then you should not really buy these pedals because that's not what you'll get. We may do that in other versions, but just very briefly on race car theory, you have something called muscle memory. And when you really use all your muscles on the brake pedal and you want to trail brake going into a corner before you hit apex, you know, your muscle memory can remember that. If you have a soft and long brake pedal, first of all, if you give a soft brake pedal to a real race car driver, he will shit himself. Sorry, my friends, but you really want it to be hard. And then secondly, your brain cannot remember a position, but your muscle can remember a pressure. So that's the whole idea with it. And you know, a lot of our competitors, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Some are smaller than us, some are bigger than us, but you know, a lot of them take automotive parts and then they use real brake fluid. You don't really want real brake fluid on your carpet at home, or you don't want your kids to drink it or your dog to drink it. And
it's not exactly the most friendly stuff, is it?
No, and the reason you have it in a car is because of the high temperatures.
That's right.
In your sim at home, you don't have high temperatures, so that's exactly why we are basically just basing this on a vegetable oil. So it's completely harmless. But when I press here, you can almost see or sense that the brake pedal is hard. When I press on this piston, then we have a piston here moving in the other direction. And then under here, we have what I think many people are using, different types of polymers. And you can give them a preload, and then the pedal is really hard. Or you can say, okay, in my specific race car that I want to simulate, there is actually, let's say, a millimeter gap between the brake pads and the disc.
Right.
Then you loosen this, and then you tighten here. And now you'll see, now I actually have this 1 millimeter of travel here. Yeah. So you can basically...
So that's a true master-slave style hydraulic setup that you've got there, just basically stacked on top of each other?
Yes, it's made specifically for SimSports. But it's exactly the same function as you have in a real car. And as you can see, we have a real pressure sensor also. And I think unlike most software out there, in our software, you will actually see the real brake pressure. Okay. And then perhaps an obvious question is that, okay, Andre, you are braking with 160 bars, but now you have your 10-year-old son. He can perhaps brake with 5 bars. How do you do that? Well, that's easy in our software, because you can push it to 160 bars as an example, and then you can decide that's 100%. But then if your son is driving, or your daughter, or whoever is driving, then you can press 10 bars, and then you can say, now this is 100%. So you can decide on your own how that whole setup works. Of course, we also want things to look good. So I have to admit, we also have LED lighting in here. You cannot see them now. And it's of course not something I'm embarrassed about by any stretch of imagination. It actually looks pretty cool. It can't be turned off.
Well, I mean, everybody pays out on LED, RGB lighting inside PC cases, but everybody has it, right? So trendsetter.
You can turn it off. But the reason I'm joking about it is that, in my opinion, that's the only piece of these pedals that doesn't have to be there for the pedals to work.
Right.
Everything else, as you mentioned in a race car, has a function. And then you can see the base here, it's actually made of aluminum as well. And then you have an integrated heel stop.
Fantastic.
So yes, we are pretty hopeful about it. We have tested it for many, many hours, both with drivers, sim racers, and this is a part of our normal development process. We have a lot of machinery. I think you've seen some of it, how we actually test this for mechanical force and strength and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was really impressed to see that, because I do have a background in electrical engineering, things like that, and I actually used to subcontract out to military. So we used to have to do a lot of that repeated testing over and over to produce mil-spec components. So seeing you guys doing that kind of testing in the factory as well is really important. And it's, obviously goes to show that you're not cutting any corners when it comes to quality. So I'm very much looking forward to getting my hands on a set to test out. Now, we talked a little bit before about ecosystem and the bigger picture, some of the acquisitions as well. So can you elaborate a bit more on what your plans are in terms of, where you see Asetek SimSports going into the future?
So if you are really sharp, you'll see our name is called SimSports. It's not called racing. And that's because 10 years out, we want to do all kind of simulators. It could be golf simulators, it could be skiing simulators, it could be bicycle, it could be flight simulators, it could be anything simulators. So that's why
Right.
the name doesn't really include anything with racing. We start with racing because, as you can tell, we have a big racing heritage. We really know a lot about race cars. We have a whole race team here behind me at Asetek. But the idea is not to do a joystick for a flight controller, just like it's not our plan just to do a pedal set. What we want the end user to be able to eventually is to buy a complete platform from Asetek, where you have motion, you have the seat, you have the steering wheel, you have the wheelbase, you have everything. And I can see a lot of others are just reselling parts from, let's take a seat for example. People are selling a seat from a racing company. Nothing wrong with that, but a racing seat is really made for racing. It has to support a lot of safety features, and that just drives up the cost unnecessarily. There are no standards there either. So eventually we want to be able to supply the full platform. And again, as I said before, our mission is to do it at affordable price levels. There's no point in building a $100,000 simulator, because then you can only sell to professionals or very wealthy individuals. Right. And as you probably have figured out by yourself now, what will come next after the pedals will be the wheelbase and some steering wheels. We do have software engineers here at Asetek, because we do software every day. We also have hardware engineers, but motor control and the whole, let's say, interface between a racing game, I call them for games, but the sim, and the hardware, we don't really have the knowledge there. Of course we could get there, but from our perspective it was like, okay, how do we get there in the fastest way, so that relatively shortly after launching our pedals we can also come to market with wheelbases and steering wheels. So we actually looked at 100 sim companies.
100?
Yes, 100. All over the world, even in Australia. But there are also some, practical limits. I would just mention Australia, since you are there. It would be difficult for us to integrate a small company in Australia and really save time. So we narrowed the scope to Europe at the end of the day. And we did a lot of testing on what we believed for our purpose was the best out there. And in terms of wheelbases, we believe the SimiCube is the best. So we actually reached out to them and said, are you interested in selling off some of your IP, some of your code, some of your firmware, and some of your know-how, so that we can get faster to market with our plans? And that's what we're doing. And I'm not going to show you, but I'm going to tell you that in the lab, a little further down here, we actually have our own first version of our steering wheel motor. And it's a fully designed motor made for sim racing. We've done that to get the cost down, to get the size down, and it's based on SimiCube's software. So we believe that we will start at least where they are now, and then add some of our features to it. So we have high expectations to that.
Fantastic.
Another thing is that in a real race car, you don't really have a wire between the steering wheel and the wheelbase. And I personally hate it. I have to say, the Formula 3 simulator I made for my son, it has a real steering wheel from a real Formula 3 race car, and there is a wire, and it's not very elegant. So we looked at what's out there, and we found Ultimate Game Tech that was a good base. They supported many games. They had a good base level software that at least we could develop on, and I liked the screen, because in most race cars you do have a display one way or the other. So without revealing too much, what we are going to do is we are going to make steering wheels without the wire, including a display if you want it, but nothing with rechargeable batteries, or you need to charge and anything like that. So so that's why we made those acquisitions.
Makes sense. So in terms of the ecosystem, and you mentioned before that obviously the pedals that you have in front of you right now are more aimed at the sort of high-end real race car kind of feel, but you may have something else for, you know, a more street car feel later on in the market. But in terms of where you intend to position yourself in the markets, do you intend to, at least long term, have more entry level, mid level and high level tiers, or are you sort of aiming more just towards the high end? Or I guess where do you see the bigger picture in regards to, you know, what kind of market segments you're planning on targeting?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that question, because we want to sell high end products, but also in the low end. And I'll give you an example. So what I'm saying now is hypothetical, in the sense that it's not because I'm trying to play marketing games or anything like that, but we are not 100% there yet. But if we agree that this is at least Asetek's attempt on building high-end pedals, let's put it like that. If we were to make a lower-end version of this, and of course we are, then we would not take away the whole aluminum construction, the ball bearings. We would keep that. But some of the fancy branding may be a little bit different. There may not be a hydraulic cylinder, which you don't care about if you deliberately don't want a hard brake pedal. It could be a load cell, it could be something else. So yes, we would have lower end products, but let's put it like this, it would be the same quality, it would be the same feel, it would be the same design, it would just be with less features. Yeah,
so that makes sense. So kind of like if you buy a top model car, it's going to cost, you know, 5 or 6 times as much as the base level car. It's still the same build quality, just a, you know, a lower spec engine, lower spec interior, you know, bits and pieces like that, but still the same fundamental quality.
Absolutely. And and I think our entry level stuff is probably what will be pushed the most out in time, because it will, on the entry level stuff, that we obviously have to cut some corners because it becomes a cost game. But I would say our mid-range pedals, I don't know a time plan just on top of my head, but that's something that will be out relatively close to these.
So what about in terms of production capacity? What sort of, I guess, what can we expect from you guys? You mentioned before that you obviously are a large company, you've got you know, a lot of production capacity. So are we expecting to sort of see you guys come out of the gates with, you know, I guess, are we going to be seeing you on retail shelves, or, you know, how are you sort of planning on entering the scene in that regard?
Yeah, as you know, the world is in a difficult place right now in terms of, you know, we have harbors shut down, we have component shortages, we have large freight ships just laying doing nothing, etc. So of course we are also bound by those physical limits. But our plan is actually, let me just back up. I think I told you in our email exchange that I don't really like this whole idea of doing pre-orders, because to put it as it is, I'm a hardware geek myself. If I want a new toy, I want it now. And I assume that's how our customers are. But in this case, we may actually do an exception, because if we do some sort of a pre-order program, we will get a better sense and understanding for the demand, and then we can better dimension our manufacturing accordingly. But the plan is that we will manufacture in high volumes, so that we don't start by building 100 and then when they are sold we need to build a new 100 that then needs to be 10 weeks at the sea. So from that perspective we do have volume in mind. In terms of channel strategy, I think there we will also be different than most, and it's not really that we are geniuses here at Asetek. We just copy what works, and it has worked pretty good for us to have, let's say, different customers on the liquid cooling side, rather than just pushing our own brand. So we are going to do both. You will be able to buy this online from us, if that's what you prefer, but you will also be able to buy it from your local reseller, if that's what you prefer. So we will for sure have a reseller network, and I think that's one of the gaps that are in the market, that there are a lot of, let's say, resellers of everything from real race car stuff to gaming, but it's difficult for them to sell sim equipment, because if you are a smaller or larger, for that sake, a reseller, and you want to sell a simulator, then you have to buy components from 5 different companies. How do you go? And how do you go to a customer and actually offer good support and making sure everything is working. So it's difficult today, and that's what we want to, we start with the pedals, of course, but as we move along, we will build our reseller network, and then we will do the support. I'm these days very unhappy that I killed the Vaporchill support forum, because 20 years ago we actually had 18,000 customers in there, and end users. Yes, that would have been nice today, but we are going to take this community approach. We are going to support the customers directly, but we're also going to support our resellers.
So I guess in my head, I'm kind of immediately kind of starting to compare you to some of the other competitors in terms of scale. So I guess from what you've described there, we can expect, at least in time, to sort of, I guess, see capacity somewhere around about what we see from the likes of, say, Thrustmaster, Logitech and Fanatec, for example.
Yes, that's the plan for sure, because if you look at this product, if we just go a little bit into the manufacturing details, you know, this very set I have here is more or less 100% CNC manufactured. And just the base here, you know, there are 20 hours of machining in that. That's roughly our cost, internal cost, $3,000. So if we were to, so if we were to make money on that, just the base would be $6,000, which makes no sense, of course. So,
no, of course.
So what we do is we invest a lot of money in the tooling and in the manufacturing so we can bring the cost down. But needless to say, that also means that we need some volume to make it a viable business. But
absolutely,
that's the investments we are doing, because we believe in the sim sports market, and in this case in the sim racing market, that is a healthy and growing market.
The most exciting thing for me as a sim racing enthusiast, and I'm sure for our audience watching as well, is, you know, it's always fantastic to have another competitor that's doing innovative things within the space. It's not only going to drive innovation, it's going to drive costs down as well, of course. And so very exciting time to be a sim racer. So just a couple more quick questions for you. I guess one big question I have as well, we talked a little bit about ecosystem before and wanting to bring everything together. So are you looking at a real sort of deep level software integration where literally every single peripheral that you buy from Asetek will all be driven through the one piece of software and all just essentially just plug into the same ecosystem?
Absolutely. And
fantastic.
Yes, and you will see it as soon as you see our software, because when you hook up the pedals now and you install the software, you will see in the left bar, I believe it is, you will see the pedals are active. But you can see every other components we're working on, basically, they're just not active now. But if you then imagine you plug them in, they would become active as well.
Yeah.
So yes, the software is a big part of a sim rig for sure.
Not only in terms of, you know, just the firmware level integration, actually making, you know, what the simulator is doing translate through to a motor through your hands, which I think a lot of people underestimate just how difficult that is. And you kind of elaborated on that a little bit when we were speaking about the relationship with Simucube. And I think that's, you know, really intelligent on your behalf to, you know, to recognize where you could use other people's expertise to, you know, bring a quality product out quickly. So that's really good. But also just in terms of the user experience and, you know, just making things simple. It's amazing how many emails I get every single week from people that have seen some of my racing videos on YouTube, and they say, wow, what an amazing setup. Where can I buy it? Like, they have this assumption that they can just walk into a shop and buy what I have. They don't realize that this is something that we've put together from probably 40 different manufacturers, and they've all got their own bits of software. You know, I've literally got a checklist that's 15 minutes long just to boot my system up and start recording a video. And I mean, obviously that's a very extreme usage case. Not many people have a setup like this one, but the thought of having an integrated system where I can just flick it on and everything just sees each other, it all just works together and works seamlessly. That is very, very exciting.
But I can refer to my son's Formula 3 simulator that was, as you know, by now built for, let's say, real life practicing purposes, and he knew how to use it. And we actually pulled it out here at Asetek because I wanted to use it as a, let's call it a reference system. So when we have our pedals, how do they compare to the pedals I used in the simulator, etc. But you know, I consider the people here at Asetek to be pretty smart, and a lot of them smarter than myself. But you know, after 5 minutes they ruined everything. The simulator was not working. And,
Right.
you know, then I had to figure out, okay, how was it? Now again, I updated the firmware to the motor. How was it? I did it to the steering wheel. What's the sequence of the mapping? You know, on the steering wheel to get the buttons to work, you need this little trick where you map buttons to a keyboard. It's this Joy to Key app, and you know,
Joy to Key, yeah. I've
it gets
experienced
really
that.
complicated. It was easy for my son because I could educate him in the right steps. But then I had not used it myself for a long time. Then we get it here at Asetek, and you know, it was almost 2 days of software back and forth just to get it to run. And that's exactly what we want to avoid.
Yeah, and I think even just, I mean, you've touched on the complexity in terms of, you know, needing to have a science degree to understand how it works in the first place. But I think another important point there as well is just the reality that a lot of us sim racers, we're dads, we're busy, we're working, we might have a spare half an hour to jump in the sim of an evening. And we don't want to spend that half an hour mucking around trying to get things working. We just want to jump in and drive. Yeah, and anything that makes that easier is fantastic.
Yeah, and that's how it should be. You know, when I was an enthusiast myself and when I built the Vaporchill, you know, I would almost say that it was an advantage that the Vaporchill was not really perfect because our customers were enthusiasts. They loved if they could help. They loved if they could tweak or find a solution or something like that. And for them, the overclocking was the passion, but also the fact that they could participate in all honesty, refining my prototypes that I was selling at the time. Where right now, we don't want to sell prototypes. Things should be tested and work. And I do realize I say a lot of fancy stuff in this interview, and of course I sincerely hope we can live up to the hype. but I can at least guarantee you that that's our aim.
As I said before, as a sim racing enthusiast, having another brand coming on, and you know, you're certainly saying all the right things. So I'm very excited to see how this all plays out. And I mean, as a fan of yours personally from back in those Vaporchill days, I'm really excited to see that it's you that's doing this as well. I think it's fantastic. So I guess in closing, anything else that you'd like to say to the sim racing community?
No, I hope they will welcome us and welcome our products, of course, and we're looking forward to working with everyone, and we are super excited, and we are not a big company in comparison with many other tech companies, but I think compared to the general sim companies, we probably are. But you know, the whole SimSports team at Asetek is kind of a team in the team. We are probably around 20 people working non-stop day and night on this right now.
Yeah, I certainly get the sense of the passion behind it. So yeah, that's very exciting.
Yeah, and thanks for allowing me to come here and talk about it. It's the real litmus test will of course be when you have tested them and see what you think. Right now, right now we are friends and all is good, and you have to believe everything. And you have to believe everything I'm saying. So in a few weeks' time, we'll know whether I was exaggerating or not.
Definitely, definitely. Well, look, thank you so much for taking time out of your, I'm sure, insanely busy day to have a chat with us. We very much do appreciate it. And yeah, look, for the guys watching at home as well, you can meet up with these guys, including André himself, at the Sim Racing Expo next weekend. So make sure you look out for that as well. I'm sure details of where they'll find you will be available on the ADAC website and everything as well. So we'll put up some details in the video description for that as well.
Yes, we will actually be co-pitting with Phoenix Racing. It's actually Phoenix Racing is a real race team, GT3 and DTM race team, and they are doing simulators as well. And they actually invited us to their stand. So if you cannot find Asetek, then find Phoenix Racing.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much once again, André, for your time. And yeah, I'll catch up with you again soon.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank you.
So there you go, guys, straight from the horse's mouth. That was André Eriksen, CEO of Asetek. And yeah, look, really excited to get my hands on those pedals as soon as we can to test them out and see what they're like in the real world. But I think the real story here, the most exciting thing is that we have a new player entering the sim racing space that has that genuine large production capacity, a real competitor to the likes of Logitech, Thrustmaster and Fanatec. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. I really hope that you guys have found the interview interesting and insightful. If you do have any additional questions as well, let us know down in the comments. I'm sure they'll be keeping an eye on them. And of course, make sure that you do drop by and say hello to them at the Phoenix stand at ADAC as well. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I'm going to wrap it up here. And yeah, we'll see you again soon. Bye.